So, work with me here. Imagine there was a video game that allowed you to assume the role of a celebrity and using creative means to beat the crap out of another celebrity that you can't help but hate. Well, keep dreaming because imagination's free and probably has better game design than today's offering. So, yeah, Celebrity Deathmatch. What more needs to be said? The late 90s, early 2000s MTV claymation series of celebrities beating the shit out of each other had attained a wide following, and not surprisingly, a video game was made for it. In addition to having games for the PlayStation 2 and Xbox, the first one, Gotham Games also released Celebrity Deathmatch for the PlayStation 1. Now, while I have yet to play the PlayStation 2 or Xbox iterations of Celebrity Deathmatch, I did hear that the games weren't particularly good. I'm willing to bet, however, that those versions are better than what was made for the original PlayStation game. For one thing, you only have a handful of celebrities at your disposal. You have guys like Mr. T, Carmen Electra, then you have Miss Cleo, and a generic Wolfman, and the Frankenstein monster, and, yeah, I'm not feeling this cast at all. I mean, really, they couldn't find enough good celebrities to fit this game. They have to put in a werewolf and an alien into the mix. Generic designs, too. I mean, has it been that much of a drop in celebrities when the game was originally conceived? Were there not enough celebrities to fit into a game that you had to resort to adding in your generic stereotypical monsters? Why don't we throw the announcers in there? That's not a bad idea, actually. On the bright side, though, they did not include Steve Austin into the game, which is a good thing because I doubt even Stone Cold could save this piece of trash.
What?
The clay models in the games are similar in respect to the models from the television show. They sort of look like what they would use on the claymation show. So in that respect, the game earns some points. But other than that, there's not much to look at. While I could somewhat forgive the rough look of the graphics, considering it's PlayStation 1, the console was old at the time of the game's release, and you already have three other systems. The characters themselves move somewhat stiffly and slowly. The actual rings and intermission sequences aren't terribly impressive or eye-catching, mostly static images for the most part. And on a whole, the Celebrity Deathmatch, in general, the game just looks bland and dull. Bland and dull is not a good thing, especially when it's supposed to be a game based on a claymation cartoon featuring celebrities blowing each other up in many creative ways. And by the way, those clay models on the TV show move a lot quicker than they do in this game. It's just sad.
What?
Okay, seriously, stop that. Thanks. The sound in Celebrity Deathmatch is pretty sad. What little music is in the game is not particularly fantastic, the voice acting isn't all that great, and the commentary, what little of it there is pretty repetitive. Although to be fair, most wrestling games and their commentary tend to be boring once you've heard everything, so it's hard to knock points for that. But on the bright side, they do have the Celebrity Deathmatch theme song in there, and, you know, the horrendous sound is at least clear, if nothing else. Doesn't necessarily make it good, but hey, you know, it's something. Not much, but it is something. And then there's the gameplay. The gameplay in Celebrity Deathmatch is an interesting little piece. It's supposed to be a hybrid wrestling fighting game sort of thing, with grapples and weapons that will appear out of thin air. You could climb turnbuckles and perform aerial attacks, and when your opponent's meter is empty, you could perform a fatality move if you know it. If you don't have to go online to look it up. Just clear death by elimination, and the fatality move will be rewarded to you. And not much else. There's no character ending per se. You just get a fatality code, and you get to use it against your opponents. And some of these fatalities look kind of weak, actually. Celebrity Deathmatch usually has inventive finishes, but this game fails to realize that little bit there. You know, it's a bit of a letdown. Even by PlayStation 1 standards, they could have come up with at least something. I don't know. But you know what, I'm getting off track here, because there's still the fight to partake in, which can be held in 4 different rings. 2 of which have steel barriers that will knock out anyone who runs into them. You know, not much more than that. There's nothing really extravagant or anything special. It's just, yeah. Anyways, you could theoretically perform different moves and grapple attacks depending on how many stars you have underneath your meter. But good luck trying to get any of it to work. Collision detection works almost half the time, usually in your opponent's favor, and control's not necessarily the most responsive or functional either. In fact, they tend to be almost sluggish in a way that just turning to face your opponent is a chore, much less anything else for that matter. On a whole, there isn't much substance to gameplay, and as such, you're unable to recreate the crazy action of the claymation show. In fact, the action in this game is rather tame. The faulty controls and unstable collision detection are the main issues among other things, but even with tight controls and spot-on collision detection, doesn't change the fact that Celebrity Deathmatch is just goddamn boring.
Boring.
This would probably explain why the gameplay footage that you're looking at right now is nowhere near as good as I'd like it to be. I mean, I tried to give this game a fair shake, and I would think that having not played this thing for years due to general lack of interest, I would go into this with renewed vigor and enthusiasm and give it my all to try to play the best of my ability. As it turned out, energy waned as I played it, and it got to a point where I just fell asleep and didn't care about playing my absolute best. Hell, I just popped in a code for constant weapon spawning just so I could get through this as quickly as possible because I just didn't care about it. I just want to be done with it, get my footage and be done with it. And that, I think, is the game's biggest issue. It's just not fun. Even the most craptacular fighting game in the world, or the most piss-poor wrestling game ever made, has some element in the gameplay that can make it fun to play among friends at least. But Celebrity Deathmatch has none of that. It's just plain boring. The fact that it has all these other issues just seem to compound that boredom even further. It's a really shallow experience, and given that it's the concept that it's supposed to be recreating, that's not a good thing. At all. What makes this all the more sadder is that you would think a video game based on the craziness of the Celebrity Deathmatch claymation show would easily translate into that interactive environment. But the truth is, nothing outlandish or outrageous or even exciting ever really happens in the game. This is a game that falls into the trap of not only being a cheaply made product to cash in on a license, but if memory serves me right, this was also a throwaway title that didn't cost me a whole lot when I first bought it brand new. Probably 10, 15 bucks at most, and even then I felt ripped off. Especially once I played it and realized that it was nowhere near as good as the TV show it was based on. Whatever enthusiasm I had initially when I first bought this thing slowly but surely deteriorated into apathy, disdain, and bitterness. And unfortunately, years later, things have not changed in the slightest. And considering that the PlayStation 2 and Xbox iterations apparently do not fare any better, Celebrity Deathmatch for the original PlayStation is a game that should not have come into fruition, because this is a downright embarrassing venture on the console. This is not a good game by any stretch of the imagination. Again, imagination is free and it probably has better game design than, this thing. Don't bother.